Hi and welcome to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. For the free tutorial today here on YouTube, we're going to be using Bailmaking pliers to create some lovely drop earrings. Now there are 3 stages to this earring, so if you like a more diminutive look, you can stop right there. Really simplistic design and using basically scraps of wire from my desk. Let's head down to the board and take a closer look. But before we go there, I just want to give you a heads up that from August, my upload date will change from Sundays to Tuesdays. So previously Sundays 4 PM British time, 11 AM Eastern, changing to Tuesdays at 7 PM British time or 2 PM Eastern time. You'll still be getting one free video every single week, so I do hope that you will continue to enjoy the content. Don't forget to give it a like and a subscription if you are enjoying the content. Have yourself a great day. So here's the earring in question. If you like a slightly more diminutive look, you could simply make the lowest section disappear. Or if you like a little bit more dangle for your earrings, I've got a couple of different ways to add some coils and beads onto the base. So you could go for diminutive or you could go for a really lovely elongated drop look, whichever you decide is the best one for you. So we're going to be working with 1 gauge of wire today, which is 1mm or 18 gauge. And I'm going to be adding in some 6mm round beads as well. In addition to my main section, which is about 6 or 7 inches long, it's a little bit too long, but it's a scrap, so that's what we're working with. I've also got a couple of 3-inch scraps of that same wire. Now I'm working with a medium temper antique bronze colour copper core wire, but you can work with whichever wire you fancy. So because this is a scrap, we're going to make sure that that's nice and smooth and warm before we do anything, especially in the very central zone of that wire. We'll probably be trimming away some of those tails anyway. In terms of tools, I'm going to be using my bent chain nose pliers, some chain nose pliers, a pair of good cutters, but the main tool we're using today, I'm going to be using my Beadalon multi-step Bailmakers, or my 6-step Bailmakers. Now this is what's going to make that lovely graduated segment up here on the top part of the earring. So let's start very centrally in the middle here. And we're going to just rotate those wires around so that they cross over neatly on the smallest pin on those pliers. And the key with this design is to make sure that the wires do cross over at the top. So you might need to wiggle that plier to get it out. If they're not crossing over neatly, you can just bring that together with any chain nose pliers. I'm using my bent chain nose pliers because I can get underneath and show you better. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more warmth on either side, and then we're going to put those pliers back in again, but in the opposite direction now, because we're going to use the next step on those Bailmakers. If you've tightened it up a little bit too much, you can just open that out, and then once you get the pin back in, make sure that those 2 halves sit down flat. And then what we're going to do is to take a second to think. On the loop that we have down at the bottom, the wire that travels from the right to the left is at the front of the design, and we want to replicate that throughout the design. So let's just push that wire down into position, which means that the wire that's coming from the right to the left needs to be at the front of the design, and the second wire going from left to right needs to go behind. So I've just opened that out so that it's exaggerated, and then I'm just going to push those together, give that a little bit of a squish, and then retract the pliers out of the way. So you can see we're building up in size. Whilst I have this in hand, I'm just going to grab any flat facing pliers and give that a very gentle little squish. Make sure that I'm happy with how that's sitting. And again, if you need to draw anything together, you can use a pair of chain nose pliers just to draw that in. What you might find is that you've made it too small. So as long as you can get that pin number 2 back in, all is well with the world. So what we're going to do next, we've taken the loop number 2 and popped it on section number 2 or pin number 2. We need to take that all the way down as far as it will go so that it sits against pin number 4. We're just going to grip that very softly, and then we're going to draw those wires around pin number 3. So this is the only ever so slightly tricky to show you part. Now again, you'll need to just make sure that the wires cross in the correct direction. So at the moment, the wire that's coming from the lower side to the upper side is at the front of the design. So as long as I replicate that, I'm going to draw the wire over that pin number 3 and ensure it circles round pin number 3, but also that it stays on the front of the design. Now, because we're working in a slightly twisted fashion, you may need to just hold on to that, draw the other wire across the back, making sure that you get that size. Now, when you give those pliers a wiggle and draw that out, you will find that it's slightly on the wonk. If I can just show you that sideways, it's slightly curved. That's absolutely fine and to be expected because we're using a tool in a way that it was not designed to be used. So let's just pop that out of the way for a second, and you can flatten that down by hand, and genuinely the best way is to just give it a little bit of a tilt and then just make sure that all of your wires are travelling as you expected them to. So let's give that a little bit of a straighten up at the top here. Make sure that everything looks as you expected. So you can see if I just tilt this in the light, you'll see that the wire travelling from the right hand side to the left is on the front, right to left is on the front, right to left is on the front. And as long as you do that, you get a really lovely flow in this design. So the next thing we're going to do is to create a wrapped loop up at the top here and add on one of our beads. Now, the safest way to do that is to grab your multi-step Bailmakers back in, pop them onto the correct loop, make sure everything's nice and tight, and then generate a 90-degree bend away. It's very difficult to show you on screen actually. So just give that a little bit of a grip. You will be able to do this much more easily. And then just pull one of those wires away at 90 degrees and then we'll wrap the other one around it. So if I just pull like so, and if I take it off the pliers, you'll see exactly what I mean. Tricky to show you with the wires coming up and away. So one of those wires has come away at 90 degrees up at the top there, and the other wire is crossing over behind it. So we're looking to try and keep that shape as much like pin number 3 as possible. So if you need to do your wrapped loop on the pin, that's going to be much better for you. Sadly, I won't be able to show that to you. So just keep your wires all on the pin, on your multi-step Bailmakers, and then you'll keep that size really nicely. What I'm going to do, so I can show you the wrapping, is just hold that very firmly with my pliers across the loop, exactly the same as you would any other wrapped loop design. So we need to keep that nice and tight without using up any of the space. So again, pop that back onto your Bailmakers and you'll retain that size. I'm unable to do that because of the way that the camera sits. So let's just take that tail around twice, and then we're going to tighten up that little coil, bring that wire to the back of the design, whichever side you decide that is, and trim away the excess. Now there's enough wire here actually to do the second and third little drop section, so there's plenty of wire available. It doesn't take up much to make these charming drop earrings. So let's just pull that down into position. And then we're going to slide on our chosen bead. Now you can use whatever bead you fancy as long as it goes on that 1mm or 18 gauge wire. Up at the top now I'm going to add a sideways loop because that works with my earring findings, and just do a second wrapped loop up at the top. I feel like I've shown you wrapped loops plenty of times. All I would say is when you're making earrings, it pays to just double check that everything is as similar as possible and that you use the same sizes to create those loops. So just take your time with that one. It takes a little bit of practice just to get that tilt on the tool so that you can get that third step. Now you can go all the way through all of the steps with this design if you want to. It's great fun and it teaches you a lot about how wire works and how you can use tools in different ways to how they were designed. So I'm going to show you now how to add some drops onto this earring. Just in case you're wondering, I haven't been in the ring. I don't know if you can see the bruise on my face. I've just had dental surgery last week and it's left quite a substantial bruise on my jawbone. So if you see a hint of blue, don't worry about it. I've not been playing weird dress up. Let's head back down to the board and make the next section for this pair of earrings. So let's make a little beaded charm dropper to add at the very bottom of our earring, and then you can mix and match which of those you actually want to use. I have a 3-inch scrap of that 18 gauge or 1mm wire. I'm just going to trim the tail away to make sure it's nice and smooth, and then I'm going to use the smallest loop on my Bailmaking pliers just to start that rotation around. They're a very worthwhile investment and I use them all the time. So let's just push that wire around for 2 rotations. Let's bring that slightly more into the light for you. And what do I mean by 2 rotations? We have got a start point, we've gone once, we've gone twice, and then we're going to pull the wire away at 90 degrees to the design, and we'll add a bead to this one. So you can play around with the order if you like, or you can add beads to all of them, or loads of beads, or a handful of teeny tiny beads. The possibilities are endless. So I'm working with some jasper, and it looks a lot like mookaite colours today. They're really, really pretty and they tone beautifully with that antique bronze colour wire, but you can work with whatever you fancy. Now, if you are making the lowest connecting part, one of the lower pieces, then what I would say is you need to make a big simple loop now. So what we're going to do is just cover up that bead and draw the wire towards us, like so. And I think I'll probably go for, it looks like number 3 on the Bailmakers. So let's rotate that wire around. If you're making earrings, it does pay to do them side by side so that you can ensure that you use the same size all the time. I think that's actually a little bit large, so let's make that slightly smaller by rotating around with number 2 on those Bailmakers until it looks about the same. That looks about right, not perfectly round, but I can fix that in a second. So let's trim that section, drop that down like so, and give that a bit of a squish. Now, if you need that to be perfectly round, you can of course use your round nose pliers, or you can adjust that slightly until it sits a little bit more neatly. So that's going to be the lowest part of our earrings. Give that a little bit of a squish and pop that down for a second. So I'll show you now how to create just a simple charm that you can add to the base of the design, and then I'll show you how to connect everything together. You can make them as long and dangly or as short and sweet as you like. Let's head back down to the board and just finish these earrings up. So to make a beadless coil charm, we're going to start in much the same way. We'll use that smallest pin again on those multi-step Bailmakers, draw that all the way around, stopping before you get a full circle, and you can make that a little bit smaller if you want to. I might just give that a little bit of a squish in, like so. And then we're going to rotate around again. I'm going to stick with the 2 rotations of wire from that starting point, all the way around, until you've gone once and twice. Then we're going to go exactly the same as we did before with that right angle bend. Give that a little bit of a smooth through. And then before we go anywhere else, what I'm going to do is grab across that angle change and just pull that away from the spiral at about 45 degrees. And then I'm going to make a slightly smaller loop this time. So if you need to get a really tiny loop, you can use number 1 on your Bailmakers, or grab your faithful round nose pliers. That's a pretty tiny, tidy little loop both ways. Let's trim that tail away. Make sure you trim the right bit. Back into the scrap pot, and then we'll close that loop up. So at the moment it's slightly open. You could put that directly onto the design, but my preference would be to bring that loop back so it's at 45 degrees. I beg your pardon, so it's at 90 degrees to the coil, and give both of those segments a bit of a squish. And in that way you'll harden them and strengthen them up. So you could go for just a beaded dropper down at the base of those earrings, or you could connect the whole thing together. So the reason that I left a large loop up at the top of this beaded section was so that it fits through the centre, like so, of the second loop that I've just dropped on the table. Well done me. And then we'll just close that little loop up, like so. Make sure that sits nicely into position, give it a quick strengthen, and then we can bring the whole thing together. So we've strengthened that small loop at the top of the non-beaded coiled charm. So you can see you've got an opening there, and we're going to pop that onto the earring. Let's close that up neatly, give it one last little squish, and then you should have a reasonably well matched pair of earrings. Now I could have, if I'd wanted to, switched around the colours of the jaspers. It's really nice to see the mustard colour and the earth, the beautiful red earth colour. You could swap them over, you could switch the order, you could put the beaded section immediately at the bottom of that drop section and then the plain one down at the bottom. You can mess around with how matched you want your earrings to be, or you could make that perfect pair. You can see they've got a lot of movement in them. I hope that you've enjoyed the easy Bailmaker earrings. Have yourself an amazing day, and I look forward to seeing you back here on the Gemhawks YouTube channel very, very soon. Bye for now.